Hey guys, this is the first official podcast for Apush. It's Peyton here. And in last Tuesday in Large Group, what we covered was the post war, what happened after the American Revolution, as well as the AOC, which is an acronym for the Articles of Confederation, the Land Ordinance of 1785, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and Shays' Rebellion. So, what we're first going to start off is what happened after the American Revolution. America was struggling to gain its independence, it got allied with France. But what happened afterwards? So, a few key things that we're going to cover is the separation of church and state, slavery, and women. So, the separation of of church and state is when they had to remove religion from politics. Now, yes, America is primarily based and set up on religion, but considering we didn't have one religion like we did in England, which is the Church of England, we had Protestants, Quakers, and Catholics. So obviously that would cause a bit of conflicts if we just had those religions and we just ruled off of those religions. So what this did was provide freedom of religion as well as no right to force someone to worship in a certain way. So like I said, we're going to give religious freedom and allow people to do and worship how they want to. Now, going over slavery, a few things that went down is we didn't abolish it completely. In northern states, they were going to start to abolish slavery and not necessarily go by it, considering they didn't really need it. Of course, you can't really force Georgia and Virginia to get rid of their slaves, considering they were so heavily reliant on them. There's this thing called chattels, which is a slave for life, and something that kind of just kept the process to repeating is when chattel slaves would reproduce and have children of their own, those children would soon become slaves as well. Some things that would happen is either they would stay on the same plantation, or when the baby was weaned off of breast milk, or just in general, they would sell the slaves to other people, sell the children. A few things were happening with women as well. So women did serve in the army during the American Revolution, but not as much you would think. There were often nurses that would help men with problems such as wounds and stuff like that. We weren't medically advanced really then, so of course we did have a lot of deaths regardless of nurses or not. Now you often would think that some women would cross dress to join the military and to fight as well, but that really didn't happen as often as you would think. Of course, no one really went full Mulan and started doing that as well. But something women would do is the Republican motherhood. Often you associate the word Republican with the conservative voters, much like you associate Democrats with liberalism. But they weren't really like that. The Republican motherhood is where mothers would stay home and raise their children to be good civic people. They did this to create a better republic, and that's where the word Republican motherhood comes in, is they wanted to build a better, basically community. That's what the word republic means. It's associated with the word community. Now, going on to the AOC. The AOC, like I said beforehand, is the Articles of Confederation. That's simply an acronym for it. The AOC was the first official form of government, which was created in 1781, written by John Dickinson. He did this during the Revolution, which is kind of ironic, but considering John Dickinson was a loyalist. He wrote this and he said, "You shouldn't declare independence unless you have a proper government ratified." But considering people were so gung ho and excited about the word independence and being on their own, they really didn't listen. Now, there's a lot of key issues with the Articles of Confederation. For example, you had no strong leadership. They didn't have a central power because they were so terrified of going back to the way it was as in England. They had no power to tax, which caused a lot of economic issues, considering they had just gotten out of the American Revolution and they had a lot of war debt. It's like I said beforehand, the Patriots were allied with the French, and the French helped us. If we didn't have the French in the American Revolution, they more than likely would have lost, considering they didn't have a proper army or military. They just had Minutemen. Another thing to note is they had no army or navy, so they had no way of defending themselves. In the documents that we covered after this large group in class, it talked about how, yes, nothing had happened yet, but that doesn't mean it's going to permanently stay that way. So they had no proper way of defending themselves, which obviously caused a lot of issues. Although, of course, a few good things that came from the AOC is it slowly brought the states closer together, forming loose ties. They still had a few flaws, but it was progressively making America to the way it is today, having a government. Some other things to talk about is the Land Ordinance of 1785. They were going to start selling land in order to get money back, considering all the debt, and they couldn't tax, so this was their way of doing it. This was essentially a way for the government to earn slash get some money. They got land to pay off national debt, like I stated before. A problem with this is they had no setup to create states. So, if a landowner from Virginia or Georgia bought some land past the Appalachian Mountains, they could simply say they were the president or that this was their land. Um, how they did this is they had people go out and charter the land, will survey the land, and they would send the map to the person who bought this. Now, this is extremely important to note because the people, they didn't just publicly publish maps. They said, like I said beforehand, they gave it to the people who paid for this. So the people who got the map would automatically take the good land that they wanted and they needed essentially and use it for themselves. And then they could lie about the land and sell it to someone else saying that it was good. But I'm not super sure on if they did that or not, and I'll probably look into that and give you some more information on that later. Um, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is basically fixing the first land ordinance. This was creating a base to make states, so you had to have some certain rules and regulations. A few of them were that you had to have at least 60,000 people in order to create a state, and you also had to have a constitution. Now, since there were multiple constitutions being made, this did cause a little bit of problems, but nothing too crazy. Um, Something that I'm going to briefly cover is the Shays Rebellion. Shays Rebellion, his name was Daniel Shay. That was who started the whole thing. Why it happened is because a few landowners and farmers in Massachusetts were being sent to jail, considering they couldn't pay off the taxes of the land that they had bought. They had fallen on hard times. And why this frustrated Shay and his posse so much is considering the money was so sparse, there'd be no reason to hold anybody accountable to pay for this. So, what they were beginning to do is burn courthouses and tarring people. So, if you don't know what tarring is, it's when people get like extremely hot tar thrown on them as well as feathers. And I'm not sure if you guys know, but tar is extremely hard to clean off of things and it burns. Like it scalds if it's hot, and that was the whole point of it. And Shay's rebellion actually got extremely far in what they were trying to do. They literally almost overthrew the government, and that's where we started to fix the AOC and to realize, hey, this isn't working and we need to fix it. So I think this is going to conclude this first podcast. If I have anything that you want me to recover or touch up on, just give me a message or email me and I will start covering on more subjects.